Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're taking a journey through time
Yeah.
to explore the history of video games,
Sounds fun.
from their very beginnings all the way to the global phenomenon gaming is today.
It's quite the story, isn't it?
It really is. And we've got some great sources for this deep dive.
Oh,
Excerpts from a book about the history of video games,
nice.
and some fascinating images, too.
I'm excited.
Now, you might think you know everything about gaming, but I bet you didn't know that the very first video game almost became an artillery game.
Really?
Yep,
I did not know that.
that's where we're going to start our journey today.
Okay.
Back in 1947 with Thomas T. Goldsmith Jr.'s cathode ray tube amusement device.
Wow, 1947. That's
I know, right?
before.
Decades before Pac-Man or Super Mario.
Yeah, like way before.
So can you paint a picture for us? What was this early contraption like?
Well, imagine an oscilloscope, like, the ones that display electrical signals,
Right.
but hooked up to a TV screen,
Okay.
and you use dials. Kind of like an Etch-a-Sketch
Oh.
to control the beam of light and simulate firing a missile at targets.
So it's like a really early, like a
Here.
target practice
Pretty much.
simulator.
It sounds simple now,
Yeah,
but back then, that was seriously cutting-edge tech.
I can imagine. But if it was so innovative,
Yeah.
why didn't it take off?
Well, the equipment needed to build it was
Yeah.
really expensive. It
Yeah.
was all military-grade stuff,
Ah,
not something your average person could just have in their living room.
made sense.
Yeah. But even though it wasn't a big hit,
Right.
it really shows you that people have always wanted to create these interactive and engaging experiences.
It's like those early inventors were planting the seeds for something groundbreaking.
Exactly.
And speaking of groundbreaking,
Yeah.
those seeds started to sprout in the form of other
Mhm.
fascinating games, like the Nimitron, built in 1940.
Now, that's one I haven't heard of.
It was a massive computer
Really?
designed to play a mathematical game, NIM.
Oh, wow.
And get this, it won over 90% of the time.
A computer that could beat you at a strategy game.
I know,
That must have blown people's minds back then.
for sure. And then there was Bertie the Brain,
Bertie the Brain.
built for the Canadian National Exhibition in 1950.
Okay.
Picture this. A 4-meter tall machine.
4 meter.
Yeah, playing tic-tac-toe.
That's massive.
I know. People lined up to challenge this mechanical marvel,
That's amazing.
and they said it was nearly impossible to beat.
So we've got these early examples showing that people were already craving interactive gaming experiences.
Yeah.
But what was the missing piece?
When did games start to look like, what we'd recognize today?
Well, I think the key ingredient was real-time graphics.
Yeah.
Those early machines were impressive,
Yeah.
but they couldn't actually show movement and action in real time, on a screen.
Right.
And that changed with a pool simulation created at the University of Michigan in 1954.
Oh, wow. So,
Players used a joystick
okay.
to aim their shots,
Okay.
and it was displayed on a fluorescent screen.
Cool.
And the computer would show the balls moving realistically.
That's so cool.
You use something like 25,000 calculations per second.
Wow. To put that in perspective, our smartphones today
Right.
can perform billions of calculations per second.
That's wild how far technology has come.
It really is. And that rapid advancement would soon lead to the games that, that we're more familiar with today.
Yeah, for sure.
In fact, a key stepping stone came just a few years later in 1958
Okay.
with a game called Tennis for Two.
Okay.
Now, this wasn't an arcade game or anything,
Yeah.
but it was played on an oscilloscope.
Really?
And get this, it was the inspiration for the game that would change everything.
Which one?
Pong.
Oh, wow. So there's like a direct lineage from this experimental game to one of the most iconic games of all time.
It really is. And then in 1962, we got Space War.
Space War.
This game was truly groundbreaking.
Oh.
It had 2 players controlling spaceships, battling it out in space.
Sounds fun.
It was. It was simple, but people loved it.
Simple but effective.
Yeah. So Space War was fun,
Yeah.
but what made it so influential?
Well, it wasn't just fun. It was also the inspiration for the very first coin-operated arcade games.
Really?
Yeah. Computer Space and Galaxy Game, both released in 1971.
That's fascinating. So Space War wasn't just a game.
Right.
It was the start of an entire industry.
Pretty much.
And speaking of game changers,
Hmm.
we can't forget about Pong.
Pong, yeah.
It came out in 1972.
Okay.
And it wasn't just another game, it was a cultural phenomenon.
Yeah, it really was.
Up until that point, arcades kind of had a bit of a shady reputation.
Right.
There were places you'd find pinball and not much else.
Yeah.
But Pong was different. It was simple,
Yeah.
addictive, and family-friendly. It brought people together.
For sure.
And made arcades respectable.
Now, let's be real. It was just incredibly fun.
Yeah, it was.
I can just imagine all the excitement in those early arcades.
Oh, yeah.
With everyone lining up to play Pong.
I bet it was quite the scene.
It must have been. And as arcades were booming,
You're right.
the technology kept evolving.
Oh, for sure.
Just a few years later, in 1975, we saw the release of Gunfight, the first game to use a microprocessor.
Wow.
This paved the way for more complex games and more sophisticated graphics.
It's amazing how quickly things were progressing back then.
It is.
And then, in 1978, came a game that truly marked the golden age of arcades.
Which one?
Space Invaders.
Ah, Space Invaders. A classic.
Rows of arcade cabinets filled with people.
I know, it's such an iconic image.
It really is.
Everyone trying to defend Earth from those pixelated aliens.
Yep. And what's fascinating is, while all this was happening in arcades, a totally different story was unfolding in living rooms.
Oh, you mean
the rise of home consoles?
That's right. It's like these two worlds were developing in parallel.
Exactly. While arcades were booming, engineers like Ralph Baer were working tirelessly to bring the magic of video games into people's homes.
Makes sense.
Baer had this vision for interactive games on TV screens.
Really?
As early as the 1950s.
That's early.
He eventually developed a prototype that he called the Brown Box.
The Brown Box.
Yep. And that prototype would eventually become the Magnavox Odyssey, released in 1972.
The world's first home gaming console.
That's right. It's incredible to think that it came out before the whole arcade craze surrounding Pong.
I know, it's crazy.
And the Odyssey was pretty innovative for its time, you know?
Yeah.
It came with 13 built-in games, controllers with dials and switches, even a light gun for target shooting.
A light gun? That's so cool.
And it came with physical accessories.
Like what?
Like paper money, playing cards, poker chips.
Wow, that's so different from how we play today.
It really is, but I can only imagine how mind-blowing it must have been in 1972. To have a device that let you control things on your own TV screen.
It was a totally revolutionary concept.
It was. And while it was way more expensive than those arcade games at the time, it proved that there was a market for home gaming.
And the rest, as they say, is history.
And soon, other companies followed suit.
Oh, yeah.
Like the first generation of home consoles, which came out between 1975 and 1978.
Okay.
A lot of them were basically Pong variations.
Makes sense.
I remember the Binatone TV Master.
Binatone TV Master?
Yeah, from the UK.
Oh.
With its bright yellow packaging and orange console.
Oh, I think I've seen pictures of that.
Yeah, it was like a childhood dream for many.
I can see why.
The market was flooded with Palm consoles.
Right.
But then a key innovation came along.
What was it?
ROM cartridges.
Oh, yeah.
The Fairchild Channel F, released in 1976.
Okay.
It was a second-generation console that really changed home gaming.
How so?
Before that, you could only play the games that were built into the console, you know?
Right.
But with ROM cartridges, you could buy new games.
So you could expand your game library.
Exactly. It's like going from black and white to full color.
I get it.
Suddenly, the possibilities for home gaming were just endless.
That must have been so exciting for gamers back then.
I bet it was.
And then, of course, came the console that really made home gaming huge.
You're talking about the Atari VCS?
The Atari VCS, yes. Later known as the Atari 2600.
That's right. And this console had an incredible run.
It did. It was on the market until 1992.
I know. That's an amazing lifespan for a gaming console.
It really is.
Why do you think it was so successful for so long?
Well, a big part of it was that they could port popular arcade games to the console.
Oh, I see.
So people could play games like Space Invaders,
yeah,
Pac-Man, Donkey Kong,
right,
all in the comfort of their own homes.
That must have been a dream come true for so many gamers.
It was.
But this rapid growth wasn't all smooth sailing, was it?
Not quite.
Didn't the industry hit a bit of a rough patch in the late 70s?
Yeah, it did. The market became saturated. You know, too many consoles.
Too many games.
Too many games. And the quality of a lot of those games wasn't great, let's be honest.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Consumers were getting more picky.
Right.
And home computers started becoming more popular.
Oh, okay.
So that chipped away at console sales.
I see. So it was like a perfect storm.
Yeah. And that led to the video game crash of 1977-78.
What happened during the crash? Was it as dramatic as it sounds?
It was a tough time for the industry, no doubt.
Yeah.
Companies went bankrupt.
Wow.
Unsold consoles ended up in warehouses. And there was this feeling that maybe the home gaming bubble had burst.
A period of reckoning?
It was.
Yeah.
But from the ashes of that crash, a new era would emerge.
And a certain Japanese company would rise to prominence.
I think I know who you're talking about.
A company called Nintendo.
Nintendo. The creators of Mario, Zelda, so many iconic franchises.
Right. And we'll dive into their story in part 2 of this deep dive.
I can't wait. So we left off with the video game industry recovering from that huge crash.
Yeah, a lot of uncertainty at that point.
Right. And then that Nintendo steps onto the scene, really changing things up.
Nintendo, the NES.
Exactly. They had actually been around for a while, making toys and arcade games.
Yeah.
But their big break was the Famicom, later rebranded as the Nintendo Entertainment System, or NES for America.
The NES. Man, that brings back memories.
I know, right?
But how did they manage to, turn things around after the industry had kind of taken such a hit?
They were pretty smart about it, actually.
Okay.
There was a lot of skepticism about home consoles after the crash.
Yeah, for sure.
So Nintendo kind of downplayed that whole console thing in their marketing.
Oh, interesting.
They even bundled the NES with ROB.
ROB?
The Robotic Operating Buddy.
Oh, yeah, I remember that little guy.
To make it seem more like a toy than a traditional gaming system.
Oh, clever.
Right. It was all about reassuring parents that this wasn't just another fad, but a whole new type of entertainment.
I see.
And Nintendo was very particular about the games they allowed on the system.
Okay.
They had those strict licensing agreements,
right,
and used region-specific lockout chips to control which games could be played where.
So they were really trying to maintain a certain level of quality.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Both for the hardware and the software.
To avoid those mistakes of the past.
Exactly. Like when the market was just flooded with low-quality games.
Right.
And you know what? Their strategy worked.
It did.
The NES was a huge success.
Yeah.
And it brought in what we call the third generation of consoles.
And that brings us to the legendary console wars.
Oh, yeah.
Nintendo versus Sega.
Mario versus Sonic.
The battle for gaming supremacy.
It was an epic battle.
Yeah, it was.
Sega with their Master System.
Right.
And then the Mega Drive, or Genesis in the U.S.
The Genesis, yeah.
Yeah. They went head-to-head with Nintendo.
It was a clash of the titans.
It was. Each company fighting for those gamers' hearts.
And Sega had a slightly different approach, right?
Yeah, they were a bit more edgy.
Oh, okay.
Appealing to a slightly older crowd. Their mascot, Sonic the Hedgehog.
Sonic.
He was all about speed and attitude.
Yeah.
A real contrast to Nintendo's family-friendly Mario.
It's amazing how those mascots became such cultural icons.
It is, isn't it?
Representing those two different philosophies of gaming.
Yeah, totally.
And did those different approaches lead to any controversies?
Oh, they did. In 1993, a game called Mortal Kombat came out.
Mortal Kombat. Oh, yeah.
It hit arcades and home consoles.
Okay.
And it was a fighting game that really pushed the boundaries of violence in video games.
Yeah, I remember that.
It sparked huge public debates about censorship.
Right.
And the impact of violent content on young people.
It was a big deal back then.
It was a defining moment for the industry.
Yeah.
The controversy surrounding Mortal Kombat actually led to the creation of the ESRB rating system.
The ESRB, right? The system we still use today.
Exactly. To classify games based on their content.
That's incredible.
It really shows the growing influence of video games
on
society as a whole.
It's fascinating to think how one game could have such a big impact.
I know, right? And speaking of impact, Mortal Kombat, along with other fighting games, like Street Fighter II.
Street Fighter II? Oh, yeah.
They actually helped revive arcades in the early 90s.
Really?
People were flocking to arcades just to play these intense competitive games.
So even with home consoles getting more powerful, arcades still had that special draw.
They did. But technology was moving forward.
Always.
And a huge turning point was just around the corner.
What was that?
The introduction of CD-ROM technology.
CD-ROMs. That was a big change. Before CD-ROMs, all the game data was stored on cartridges, which had limited storage.
Yeah, but CD-ROMs, they could hold so much more data.
I see.
Allowing for better graphics, bigger soundtracks, and even full motion video.
Wow. That must have felt like stepping into a whole new world.
It did.
Were there any challenges with this new technology, though?
There were a few, yeah.
Like what?
Early CD-based consoles.
Okay.
Like the 3DO, the Atari Jaguar, the Amiga CD32. They faced a lot of hurdles.
Okay.
They were expensive.
Right.
And the technology was still pretty new.
Yeah.
So there were issues with loading times and performance.
So they kind of paved the way, but couldn't quite deliver on the full potential of CD-ROMs.
Is right.
Until the arrival of the Sony PlayStation in 1994.
Ah, the PlayStation.
It's a true game changer.
It was, bringing us iconic franchises like Crash Bandicoot, Spyro the Dragon, Metal Gear Solid.
Yeah. What's the story behind the PlayStation?
It's actually pretty interesting.
Okay.
Sony initially partnered with Nintendo to develop a CD-ROM add-on for the Super Nintendo.
I did not know that.
But at the last minute, Nintendo backed out of the deal.
Oh, wow.
Leaving Sony in a tough spot.
That must have been a blow.
It was. But they turned that setback into a massive opportunity.
How so?
They already had the technology, right?
Yeah.
So they decided to go it alone.
Bold move.
And entered the gaming market with their own console, the PlayStation.
And it was a genius move.
It was.
The PlayStation was sleek, affordable, and had a fantastic lineup of games that really showcased what CD-ROMs could do.
Like Rayman and Wipeout.
Yeah. Games with stunning graphics for the time.
It was mind-blowing.
Yeah.
And Sony's experience with consumer electronics and their relationships with game developers helped them create a console that was both technologically advanced and commercially successful.
The PlayStation was a major turning point in gaming history, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
But what about PC gaming? Was it evolving alongside these console wars?
Oh yeah, PC gaming has always been a hub of innovation, often pushing boundaries that consoles would later adopt.
I see.
Companies like id Software were really leading the charge.
Okay.
They made groundbreaking games like Doom and Quake.
Doom, man.
Which completely changed 3D graphics and immersive gameplay.
I remember playing Doom for the first time. It was amazing.
Right.
The speed, the environments, the intensity.
It was a game changer.
It was.
And we can't forget about the handheld market either.
Oh, yeah, the handheld.
That was also evolving.
For sure.
Nintendo's Game Boy, released in 1989, was a phenomenon.
The Game Boy. That little gray brick with the monochrome screen?
I know, right? But it became a cultural icon.
It did. What was the secret to its success?
Well, for one, it was super affordable.
Okay.
And even though it was simple, it had a fantastic library of games.
Yeah, like
Tetris.
Tetris.
Which became the killer app for the Game Boy.
Tetris on the Game Boy. A classic combination.
It was the perfect portable game. Easy to pick up, but so addictive.
Totally.
Okay.
But Nintendo wasn't the only one making handhelds, right?
Right. Sega released the Game Gear.
Game Gear, okay.
It had a color screen, but the battery life was terrible.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
A lot of companies tried to compete with Nintendo.
Yeah.
But the Game Boy stayed on top for years.
It really did.
And the handheld market kept evolving, peaking in the 7th generation.
Oh, yeah.
With the release of the PlayStation Portable, or PSP.
The PSP.
Yeah.
And the Nintendo DS.
The DS. Those were the handhelds of my youth.
Mine too.
The PSP had that console-quality gaming on the go.
Right.
And the DS had those dual screens and touch controls.
So innovative.
They really pushed the boundaries of what handhelds could do.
They did.
And then came the modern era of gaming.
Right.
With Sony still at the top with the PlayStation 2 in 2000.
The PS2. A technological marvel.
It was. It had a huge library of groundbreaking games.
Like the God of War series?
Oh, yeah, God of War.
It set a new standard for console gaming.
And then Microsoft joined the console market with the Xbox. Xbox, yeah.
Bringing their PC gaming expertise to the living room.
Right.
I remember playing Halo. Combat Evolved on the Xbox for the first time.
Such a good game.
A true revelation.
Halo established the Xbox as a serious contender.
Yeah.
It created a whole new dynamic.
Forcing Sony and Nintendo to step up their game.
Exactly. And then came the Nintendo Wii in 2006.
The Wii.
It completely changed the game.
It did. Motion controls, family-friendly games, that iconic white console.
It was a cultural phenomenon.
It really was.
Those intuitive motion controls.
Yeah.
And games like Wii Sports.
Right.
It appealed to a wider audience than ever before.
Everyone was bowling and playing tennis in their living rooms.
It was amazing.
It was a brilliant move by Nintendo.
It was. They weren't afraid to take risks and innovate.
And Microsoft followed suit with their motion sensing tech. The Kinect.
The Kinect, yeah. Players could control games with their bodies.
No controller.
It was revolutionary.
It was.
It had some limitations, but it opened up so many possibilities for interactive entertainment.
It's amazing to see how each generation of consoles brought something new to the table.
It is. Always pushing the boundaries of what was possible.
And while all that was happening with consoles, a new force was gaining momentum.
What was that?
Mobile gaming.
Ah, mobile gaming.
Remember those early Snake games on our Nokia phones?
Oh, yeah. Simple, but addictive.
And as smartphones got more powerful,
right,
mobile gaming just exploded.
Everyone had a gaming device in their pocket.
It was a total paradigm shift.
It was. And with the rise of mobile gaming came a new business model.
What was that?
Free-to-play.
Free-to-play games.
Like Candy Crush Saga and Angry Birds.
Oh, yeah. Those were huge.
They offer free gameplay, but you could buy in-game items or upgrades.
Right.
It was a super profitable model.
It was.
But it also sparked debate about gaming addiction.
Yeah.
And potential exploitation.
A complex issue.
It isn't.
But there's no denying that free-to-play has changed gaming.
Completely changed it.
And while mobile gaming was booming, online gaming was also evolving.
Connecting players from all over the world.
Right, like massively multiplayer online games or MMOs.
MMOs, yeah.
Like World of Warcraft.
World of Warcraft, what a game.
Creating these vast virtual worlds where players could interact.
And form communities.
Go on epic adventures together.
It was a new era of social gaming.
It was.
It's incredible how video games have evolved from those early arcade cabinets.
I know, right?
To these huge online worlds.
It's amazing.
And with technology always advancing, what other innovations were on the horizon?
Well, VR and AR started to gain traction.
Virtual reality and augmented reality.
Exactly. They offered even more immersive gaming experiences.
VR headsets transporting players to new worlds.
Right.
And AR games like Pokemon Go.
Yeah, Pokemon Go, overlaying virtual elements onto the real world.
Blurring the lines between the digital and the physical. It's wild. The future of gaming is going to be exciting.
And maybe a little mind-bending.
It is. The possibilities are endless.
And as gaming continued to evolve, another interesting thing happened.
What was that?
The rise of esports.
Ah, esports. Competitive gaming going mainstream.
It's amazing how watching people play video games has become a global spectator sport.
I know. Esports tournaments fill stadiums.
Millions watching online.
Competing for huge prizes and sponsorships.
It's incredible.
It is.
From those early days of Pong and Space Invaders to esports and VR.
It's been quite the journey.
The journey of video games has been remarkable.
It really has. And with technology always pushing forward, who knows what the future holds?
It's exciting to think about.
But before we jump into the future, let's take a moment to appreciate the human stories behind all of this.
From their simple beginnings to this global force, it's amazing, right?
It really is. The video game industry is worth billions now.
I know, it's crazy.
And its influence is everywhere. Fashion, music, movies, you name it.
Yeah, you see it everywhere.
And it goes way beyond just entertainment.
Well, for sure.
Video games are being used in education, healthcare, even military training.
Yeah. It's incredible how something that started as, just a fun pastime has become such a big part of our world.
It is. It is. As we wrap up our deep dive, it's important to remember that this history, it's not just about the technology and the big hit games.
Right.
It's about the people. Who put their heart and soul into creating these experiences, the communities, the impact on society.
The whole cultural impact.
Exactly. And those human stories behind the games, they're just as fascinating.
They are.
We've talked about some of the pioneers like Ralph Baer.
Right, the father of video games.
Exactly. His work on the Magnavox Odyssey was groundbreaking.
It was.
Then there's Nolan Bushnell.
Oh, yeah, the founder of Atari.
He really helped make the industry what it is today.
For sure.
Gave us Pong, Pac-Man, all those classics.
And of course, Shigeru Miyamoto. The mastermind behind Mario, Zelda.
So many Nintendo classics.
Countless classics.
These individuals and many others.
Right.
They shaped the gaming world.
It's incredible how a few people can have such a huge impact,
I know. And we can't forget about the women who helped pave the way.
Oh, absolutely.
Like Roberta Williams.
Yeah, Roberta Williams.
She's changed adventure games forever.
Yeah, with games like King's Quest and Phantasmagoria.
Those were groundbreaking games, really pushing the boundaries of storytelling.
It's important to recognize those pioneers.
It is. And as gaming grew, so did the communities around it.
For sure, from those early arcades to the online communities today.
Yeah, it's always been a social experience.
I remember spending so much time in arcades as a kid.
We too.
Watching people play, sharing tips, just enjoying that atmosphere.
Right.
It was a real community.
It was. And now with online gaming,
yeah,
those communities are global.
Yeah.
Yeah.
LAN parties, esports tournaments, online forums, Twitch.
All connecting players.
It's remarkable how video games can bring people together.
It really is, from all walks of life.
Makes you wonder what the future holds, you know?
It does.
What new genres will we see?
Right.
What crazy new tech will they come up with?
What will push the boundaries even further?
Will VR finally become, the main platform?
It's exciting to think about.
It really is. So, as we wrap up our deep dive, what stood out to you? What sparked your curiosity?
Well, for me, it's those early days of arcade gaming.
Yeah, the arcades.
There's something special about them, that sense of community, that excitement. It was unique.
It was.
We want to dust off some of those old classics and give them another go.
Yeah, those retro gems are still great.
They are. And for our listeners out there,
yeah,
maybe this deep dive has inspired you to revisit some of the games we talked about.
Or learn more about those gaming legends.
The history of video games is full of amazing stories. Technological marvels, cultural touchstones. It's a journey worth taking.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So until our next deep dive,
keep
on gaming, keep on exploring, and keep on learning.
This has been The Deep Dive. Thanks for listening.